Welcome back to Golf Xtra. As the initial shock of the LIV-PGA merger begins to fade in the rearview mirror, we're still looking through the wreckage of the conflict. One of the most interesting pieces of this merger is still the role going forward of Rory McIlroy, long the PGA's most loyal advocate and someone who has berated LIV golfers at every turn for their decision to defect. Even so, the merger was completed without any input from McIlroy, and he now has to figure out his new place in this new and improved golf organization. But what does Rory think about his future? His bold comments might surprise you. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Now, let's get right into Rory McIlroy's scathing comments about LIV Golf following its merger with the PGA Tour. After the LIV-PGA merger, there were a lot of people whose opinions and outcomes needed to be considered. There were the LIV golfers, like Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka, who seemed to be coming out on top. They had received huge payouts from the Saudi-backed LIV Tour, but had still been able to play in all of the majors, and were now ready to assimilate back into the PGA Tour. There was Tiger Woods, who had put his reputation on the line to defend the PGA Tour, and how had received a gigantic near 10-figure offer from LIV in order to stay loyal. Now, he found himself on the wrong end of the deal, and not even consulted on the deal. Perhaps the most interesting person involved, though, was Rory McIlroy. As we mentioned at the top, Rory put his neck on the line for the PGA Tour again and again, but wasn't even consulted in the deal that eventually put an end to the LIV-PGA civil war. Immediately after the merger occurred, pundits around the golf world began to wonder what Rory's thoughts were on the matter. They didn't have to wait long, as only a couple days after the merger, Rory had press availability prior to the RBC Canadian Open. Although fans of the game everywhere were waiting patiently for McIlroy's comments, Rory himself wasn't looking forward to having to face the media at all. He opened his comments at the press conference by saying, "I wasn't looking forward to this, to be honest with you, but once we all get done here and you write your stories and say, what I say, or quote me or whatever it is, I'm going to go to the range and do some practice and try to get ready for a golf tournament." And Rory has played. He has played well. Though he hasn't found himself in the winner's circle over the past few tournaments since the merger, Rory has continued to be successful despite the stress of the events. Even still, the disdain that Rory feels for LIV remains palpable. In his comments prior to the RBC Canadian Open, he continued by saying, "It's not LIV. I think that's the thing. I still hate LIV. I hate LIV. I hope it goes away. And I would fully expect that it does. And I think that's where the distinction here is. This is the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the PIF. Very different from LIV." Those are the strong comments from McIlroy that we mentioned earlier. They don't disappoint, do they? Rory continues to make his stance explicitly clear, and even as the players who fled to LIV come back into the fold, he continues to double down. It's a bold move for sure, especially considering that no one in the general public has much of any idea how the newly emerged entity will function in actuality. With that being said, Rory does seem to have some ideas about how the future might look. During his comments, he laid what he sees as the future reality out, saying, "It's the PGA Tour, DP World Tour, and the Public Investment Fund are basically partnering to create a new company. This has gotten, I think that's where I was a little frustrated, because all I've wanted to do, and all I've wanted in the past year from basically this tournament, is to protect the future of the PGA Tour and protect the aspirational nature of what the PGA Tour stands for. And I hope that this does that. But I think with the headlines being PGA Tour merges with LIV, I mean, if you look at the structure of how it's structured now, this new company sits above everything. Jay's the CEO of that. So technically, anyone that is involved with LIV now would answer to Jay. So the PGA Tour has control of everything." That's certainly one way to spin it. And that has some basis in fact. After all, Jay Monahan will be the CEO of the LIV-PGA merged entity. But does he have full control over the direction of the organization? That is definitely up for debate, given that the PIF has thrown the majority of the financial weight behind the arrangement. Rory finished his comments prior to the RBC by saying, "So look, going forward, I hope that there may be a team element, and you're going to see maybe me, maybe whoever else playing some sort of team golf. But I don't think it will look anything like LIV has looked, and I think that's a good thing. Unlike Rory, LIV CEO Greg Norman has repeatedly expressed confidence to LIV players and the media at large that LIV will continue to exist as it had pre-merger. However, his role in the future of LIV is up for debate, and he was suspiciously left out of all the major press releases associated. As far as Rory is concerned, he'd just as soon see Norman get left on the editing floor when the paperwork is officially drawn up for the merger. As far back as November 2022, McIlroy was voicing his concerns about Norman and discussing a potential reconciliation between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf, saying, "I think Greg Norman needs to go. I think he just needs to exit stage left. He's made his mark, but I think now is the right time to say you've got this thing off the ground, but no one's going to talk unless there's an adult in the room that can actually try to mend fences." He wasn't solely focused on Norman, also mentioning the then ongoing litigation pending between the two rivals and saying, "There are obviously two lawsuits going on at the minute. There's the PGA Tour versus LIV, and there's obviously this one that's coming up with the DP World Tour in February. Nothing can happen if those two things are going on. Right now, it is a bit of a stalemate." However, Norman obviously paid the closest attention to the first statement and took it to heart. While he hadn't seen fit to respond immediately, Norman did clap back in statements a few months later, most notably by retorting, "Rory doesn't know anything, right? All due respect, Rory, he doesn't know anything about LIV. He knows something about the PGA Tour. He sits on the PAC Council. It doesn't have the power you think because the board has the power, right? Rory doesn't know what he's talking about because he doesn't know the facts." Norman's statement continued, "I've always been a fan of Rory McIlroy's. My advice to him would be just sit back, take stock, watch what you say, because in the end there will be a situation where, he'll be asked a few questions that he may not want to be answering." That's an ominous statement, but more on that in a second. First, Norman finished off his comments by saying, "There are going to be a few who are probably being asked to be vitriolic against the LIV guys for whatever reason. Until you completely understand what you're talking about, don't open your mouth, because you'll only embarrass yourself." That's my read on it, to be honest with you. PGA loyalists will hate to hear us say it, but the recent events have only served to vindicate Norman's comments about McIlroy. As it turned out, McIlroy didn't have any prior knowledge of the merger, and ultimately finds himself in a position where he has to answer questions that he would rather not. Seeing as that has already occurred once, there's not a question that it could certainly occur again. That just begs the question, is Rory on the mark this time? Or will him and his dogged PGA loyalty be left out in the cold again? So, what do you think about Rory McIlroy's comments about the PGA Tour and its merger with LIV Golf? Do you think that'll come around one day, or will he forever be a pariah to the LIV golfers that his organization is merging with? Be sure to leave us a comment with what you think down below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you can watch our latest content updates as soon as they drop. We'll catch you in the next one. Have a great day.